and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching Gulf Today on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the headlines of this hour. In Jerusalem, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and US Vice President J.D. Vance has rejected claims that Israel is a client state. They discussed Washington's plan to end the Israel-Gaza war, including Hamas's disarmament and Gaza's reconstruction, with Vance expressing optimism about strengthening regional alliances. Israeli lawmakers have the advancement of West Bank annexation bills as global pressure mounts for Israel to comply with the ICJ ruling on Palestinian rights. UN Chief Antonio Guterres has urged Israel to abide by the court's decision, while UN rights expert Francesca Albanese has condemned the US-brokered Gaza ceasefire plan as inadequate to stop what she called a genocide. A targeted shooting in Syria's Idlib province has left 3 Druze community members dead. Gunmen has opened fire on a van near the village of Kafr Maris. The attack follows a history of sectarian tensions and recent clashes between Druze groups and pro-government forces. Syrian authorities have arrested a former military officer accused of executing detainees at the notorious Saidnaya prison during the rule of ousted leader Bashar al-Assad. The prison, long symbolic of Assad's brutal repression, which has been linked to thousands of torture and execution cases. US President Donald Trump has imposed Ukraine-related sanctions on Russian oil giants Lukoil and Rosneft, targeting companies that fund the Kremlin's war machine. The US Treasury Department has said that further action is possible, calling for a ceasefire in Ukraine. The European Union's 19th sanctions package against Russia will target 4 Chinese companies, including 2 oil refineries and a trading firm, in what officials call the most economically significant action against China. Beijing has denied any wrongdoing as the EU moves to adopt the new sanctions this week. Russian forces have shot down 139 Ukrainian drones overnight, while President Zelensky reports 6 deaths and dozens of injuries from Russian strikes targeting Ukrainian cities and energy infrastructure. He urges allies for stronger sanctions and weapon supplies. US President Donald Trump has said that he expects to reach a trade deal with Chinese President Xi Jinping during their meeting next week in South Korea. Trump has also planned to discuss China purchase of Russian oil and possibly restart US soybean exports. He also mentioned that a deal on nuclear arms could be on the table. We start in the Middle East. In a meeting held in Jerusalem, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and US Vice President J.D. Vance has rejected claims that Israel is merely a client state of the US, emphasizing their partnership built on shared values and strategic goals. Both leaders have discussed the next phases of Washington's plan to end the Israel-Gaza war, including Hamas's disarmament and reconstruction of Gaza. Vance has further expressed optimism that this plan could strengthen regional alliances, particularly with Arab nations, and further the Abraham Accords. While acknowledging the tough challenges ahead, both leaders have showed commitment towards a future of peace and security, with a focus on rebuilding Gaza and ensuring lasting stability in the region. Vance has also met with Israeli President Isaac Herzog, who urged efforts to return all the hostages. Now for this discussion, we welcome Sasha Machta. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Jerusalem. Thank you very much, Sasha, for joining us again. Good to see you. Thank you. Now, Sasha, the claims by the claims that we just heard Israel is a merely client state. How is this news covered over there, and what was your reaction to this?
I think it's actually quite the opposite. The U.S. is showing how invested they are in this deal, in the success of this deal. The U.S. has constantly, since Trump took power, shown that they're so invested in ending the war and bring the hostages back, and they delivered on that. But not only that, after the hostages returned, the living hostages, they were still invested in returning the deceased hostages, and they're still invested in peace because they they want Israel to thrive. They want the Middle East to thrive, and I think that it's actually quite the opposite. That the U.S. and Israel have never been this close in coordination, and we're not a client state. I think the claims. I understand some people might be upset in Israel that the U.S. has so much of a say on policy in this case, but I think that it aligns with Israel's interests. It aligns with Israel's goals. When the war began, Israel had two goals, which was to bring the hostages home and to end the war. And we didn't care how we were going to get it done. And I think that if we have to have such close coordination with the U.S., I think that we're happy to do so because it achieves both of the goals that we set forward, and we're happy to have this help and strong alliance.
And thank you, Sasha, for sharing that. I would like to also welcome our another guest to this discussion, Ali Muhammad Abushbak. He's a Palestinian researcher, joins us live from Cairo. Ali, what was your reaction to this news about Israel being a client state, and about comments from our other respectable guest, Sasha?
Oh, thank you for having me. The thing is, there is a difference between Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the state of Israel, because nowadays, after Benjamin Netanyahu, there has a different perspective about the Israel, and the world has a different also opinion about the Israel. Furthermore, also during the time period of Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, considerably, according to everyone, according to every journalist, they are loved one. Both of them, they are flirting each other on social media and etc. So I guess this statement is correct, because whatever Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump have done for Benjamin Netanyahu, there is no one president in the history of America did it before, and we have seen a several of time that Donald Trump flirting Benjamin Netanyahu and his policy, and he is interfere in Israel's policy as well. I mean, internal policy about the judgment and the charge against Benjamin Netanyahu with regard the corruption charge. So the thing says here, I also, by the way, today, I guess Likud party in Israel, they are calling for snap election. So now the Israeli government coalition between Benjamin Netanyahu and Smotrich and Ben Gvir is going to collapse, and hopefully these three people, they will end their political life, because they are destroy Israel as well as the Middle East. So the Benjamin Netanyahu is continuously asking for change the Middle East. So about with regard the accord of Abraham Accord, I'm not optimist. I'm not optimist. Arab region and Arab area country, they are going to sign agreement with Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as Benjamin Netanyahu he described as a criminal according to international criminal code. So things is Benjamin Netanyahu is destroying Israel, and also we have seen the public opinion in America itself. They are outrage against their policy with regard to Israel, because they consider America is first, not Israel is first. What has done recently Donald Trump, he did everything for Netanyahu to save his political life, and it seems like, according to several of American opinion audience, they consider Israel as a state of one state of American state. So I guess I totally agree with these things. And Benjamin Netanyahu, he did many things against Israel, not for Israel.
And Sasha, I would like to bring you back into that. Thank you, Ali, for sharing that. Sasha, how do you see the rise of a very, very conservative or right-wing politicians and their popularity in Israel?
I think that it's not a new phenomenon. I think that in Israel in the past years we've seen the far right growing. I think it's a consequence of the peace process and the failure of the peace process. We've seen that Israelis in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 90s especially, they were very much peace oriented. They were thinking that all the wars were going to end. They were thinking that basically it was the end of all the wars between Israel and the Palestinians. We saw Yitzhak Rabin, he tried the Oslo Accords, and unfortunately we were met with terror, and that's why there's a saying that says Yasser Arafat killed the peace camp, and Yasser Arafat killed the Israeli left. So I think that it's a natural consequence of the despair of Israelis who have felt that all their efforts to reach peace have been met with terror and violence, and they're looking for another alternative. And unfortunately, that's the far right. But things look like next elections, it could be close, and that we might have a different government. But I think that it's a consequence of the history here and of giving peace a chance, but also of seeing all our hopes and desires fail in such a complicated region.
And building on that, I would like to also take Ali's stance. Ali, what's your take on that, with what Sasha has just shared?
I totally agree with Sasha, and the peace process have been assassinated the day Ishaq Rabin have been assassinated, and ends the way for peace process, because he was the one the only leader serious with regard the peace process, as well as there is Ehud Olmert. He's also serious with the peace with Palestinian, but rest of that, there is no one Israeli politician he's ready for the peace process with Palestinian. And also, it's worth mentioning that the far right wing in Israel, they are feeding by hate and feeding by conflict with Palestinian. That's it. They are not interested about the peace. So during their election campaign, it's against Palestine, and we have seen Benjamin Netanyahu. He's maintaining his power because of his speech and because of his policy against the Palestinian and seizing a several of land in West Bank, as well as the war in Gaza and etc. So the rise of right wing in Israel, it's that the politicians, they are feeding by this hate speech and feeding by this conflict. There is so that there is the left wing is very weak in Israel, and unfortunately last one it was if Shasa he correct me, last one it was in 2008, the government coalition between Ehud Olmert and Ehud Barak and Tzipi Livni. And the rest of that, we didn't have seen any left wing in Israel ruling Israel, and we didn't see any left wing power. Has a power in Israel, and they both of the also they are moderating between the conflict between Palestinian and Israel, and they have a good perspective about peace. We have seen last 2 months, Ehud Olmert he conducted a conference for peace with Palestinian in France, and he met a Palestinian leader, and they were discuss about the peace process between Palestinian and Israel. So the thing is, I hopefully I'm hope Sasa that we will see a good government in Israel,
Yes.
and they are serious with peace. But I'm not optimist because of both. I told you,
Yes.
community, Palestinian community and Israeli community, they have no issue with each other. They want to live. They want to live in peaceful coexistence, and they want to live in peace. But the things, it's only politician who's feeding this conflict and who's feeding the hate between Palestinian and Israel.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much to both our guests for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now we stay on this topic. Israel's parliament has given initial approval to a bill that could lead to the annexation of the occupied West Bank. The bill, which would apply Israeli law to the region, has passed a preliminary vote in the Knesset by a narrow margin of 25 to 24. Now, the bill was introduced by lawmakers outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition. This is the first step in a lengthy legislative process that could ultimately integrate the territory into Israel. The vote comes as U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance visits Israel following President Donald Trump's previous opposition to such annexation. In response, Palestine's foreign ministry has condemned Israel's move, stating that Israel has no sovereignty over Palestinian land. The ministry has further reaffirmed that the West Bank, including Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, are considered a single Palestinian territory under international law. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has also expressed concerns over Israel's new annexation bill. He has further clarified that while Israel is a democracy and has the right to make such decisions, the U.S. does not support this move at this time and believes it could be counterproductive to the Gaza peace process. Let's listen in.
Well, that's a vote in there. Yeah, that's a vote in the Knesset. But obviously, I think the president's made clear that's not something we'd be supportive of right now, and we think there's potential even threatening to the peace deal. So, they're a democracy. They're going to have their votes. People are going to take these positions. But at this time, it's something that we think it might be counterproductive.
Additionally, Rubio has also discussed the success of diplomatic meetings between U.S. officials and countries in the region, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. Let's listen in.
And I think both Jared and Steve had very positive meetings in both Saudi Arabia and in Qatar and in the UAE, which I think they're going to UAE. Very positive meetings with all of our partners in the region about what they're willing to contribute, and countries outside the region as well. We're not ready to announce those, but countries outside the region, including majority Muslim countries outside the region that are prepared to offer things that you really wouldn't have thought they've never done before.
Furthermore, Rubio has stressed the U.S. goal of restoring Palestinian civil authority in Gaza, and this includes establishing a non-Hamas police force to maintain order. According to him, this plan has been agreed upon by international partners. Now we welcome back Sasha Machta. He's a political commentator to our discussion, and Ali Mohammed Abushbak. He's a Middle East researcher from Cairo to our discussion. First, Sasha, now looking back at this topic or this news, is this preliminary Knesset vote on West Bank annexation, is this a symbolic move or a real policy shift? And also, going back to our previous discussion, where is the left-wing representation in Knesset lie now?
So first I'd like to make a small correction to my friend Ali, where he said that the last left-wing government in Israel was in 2008. Actually, in 2021, 2022, we had a broad coalition from the left to the right, including the first Arab party in the Knesset. So I think it's a very important correction to make. And I'd like to say that the left in Israel right now and the right, there's some broad consensus that a Palestinian state is not possible at the moment. We've just been met with the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and I think that the consensus, even in the more left-wing parties like Yair Golan's Democrat Party, is that as of now there will not be a Palestinian state. Maybe a future pathway is what the left is thinking of now, but I think no one in Israel, after the trauma and pain we've experienced over the past years, is even thinking of a Palestinian state being created, especially not over the hilltops overlooking Tel Aviv, the airport, and all of the center of Israel. That being said, I also don't think that there is room for a peace process right now, as my friend Ali also mentioned. I think that, first of all, there's a process of de-radicalization that must be taken, a process of changing the education system in the Palestinian Authority, changing the values that the Palestinians grew up with. And I think that organizations like UNRWA have just propagated this conflict, and they've educated Palestinians to have this mindset that they're going to continuously be refugees and not seek peace. And I think that this is a main obstacle that we've seen, the education and the radicalization. And unfortunately, the Palestinian Authority's leaders, as well as Hamas, have made every effort possible to keep their people suffering and keep their people as a refugee status, to launch an eternal war on the state of Israel. So I'd like to say that first of all. And I think the annexation is pretty much symbolic at the moment. If you actually look at the details, Netanyahu's party actually didn't vote for it. Only one member of Knesset from Netanyahu's party voted, and Bibi even made his party boycott this vote. So we see that this is more of a symbolic action than a policy shift and a policy on the ground. But what it does shift is we see that Israel is also going to have to take unilateral measures. I'm not saying that this is going to happen. I don't think it will happen. It's just symbolic. But we saw that European countries took reckless actions in recognizing a Palestinian state in the middle of the war as a reward for Hamas. And Israel, of course, was going to meet this with a reaction. And I think it's only natural for some people and some parties in Israel to feel pushed by the world and to take drastic decisions. But yes, I agree that it's just something symbolic. And I'd like to also make the point that we're lucky that in Israel this vote's even allowed to happen, because I think it's the only country in the Middle East where there's the possibility of having a democratic vote for even a symbolic action. And I think that's the strength of the country.
Yes.
So if we're going to talk bad about one of Israel's votes, we should also acknowledge that it's the only place in the region where this kind of vote would even be able to happen. And I'm proud that I live in a democracy, and I hope that my Palestinian neighbors will also be able to have a democracy and a de-radicalized society and a demilitarized society, and be able to live in peace and not
Yes.
live under
Sasha.
continuous misery.
Yes,
So
Sasha,
thanks.
thank you for sharing that. Ali, I would like to welcome you back to this discussion. Building on Sasha's answer, as this could be primarily just a symbolic decision, how do you see this move? And what do you think if a U.S., since we know U.S. opposes this, and many Arab countries as well do you think anyone would be able to stop this moving further?
First of all, Israel doesn't give an attention for the international community reaction and for the violating the international law, because as you know, in the resolution 2334, the United Nations Security Council in 2016, they considered the Israelis' settlement in West Bank, it's illegal. And up to now, since 2016 up to now, how many settlement units Israel have been built and established? So also about the annexation in 2018, the first term of Donald Trump, he welcomed that. Donald Trump, one of his peace plan, it was the annexation. And also, I guess it's not a symbolic, because Benjamin Netanyahu, he said, I will not set the Palestinian establishing their statehood. So this is one of the challenging and one of the barriers that Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to do to prohibit the Palestinians to establish their statehood. So I guess either it's a symbolic, or if they are going to do it, because Israel, as you know, it's acting with an impunity, with the punishment, and as above the international community and international law. So it doesn't care about its perspective. And we have seen how much damage its perspective during the war in Gaza. And still, Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to manipulate the Israeli community. So the thing is, either it's, as I mentioned, it will be a symbolic, or it will be an action that also catastrophe for the Palestinian statehood. And it will make the peace process between Palestinian and Israel more worse than before. And it will, I don't know, if there is action, there is reaction. If Benjamin Netanyahu, what they are, thinking that the Palestinian in West Bank, will wait and will give them flour for this kind of action, and they will resist, obviously, and that will escalate the violence between Palestinian and Israel. And again, Benjamin Netanyahu and his Israeli media machine, they will start blaming Palestinian why they resist. I don't know, the international law, they are protected the resistance for the civilians who's under occupation, except in Palestinian case, it's prohibited. Israel has the only right to defend itself, but the people who's under occupation should be accept whatever. I don't know the double standard with this community, and we have seen that disbelief in this kind of rule. It's just only make to be fit with some country, and to be against some other country.
Yes.
So this is ridiculous, and I don't know how the world observed such kind of action on the ground.
Yes,
Yeah,
Ali.
also.
Thank you very much to both our guests for joining us and sharing that insight. Now we stay on this topic. The International Court of Justice has ruled that Israel must facilitate humanitarian aid into Gaza. This includes relief schemes provided by third states, the UN, and the International Committee of Red Cross. ICJ President Yuji Iwasawa has said that Israel is obliged to provide Palestinians with basic needs to survive. The ruling was quickly rejected by Israel as aid groups work to scale up humanitarian assistance following a fragile ceasefire earlier this month. Let's listen into what Yuji Iwasawa has said. Now we move on to our next news. Iran has announced the conditional release of Mahdi Esfandiari, an Iranian citizen who has been detained in France since February. As per reports, the French court decided to release her under judicial supervision yesterday with strict conditions in play. These conditions include regularly reporting to the police and a ban on leaving the country for using social media. Now, Mahdi Esfandiari's release is being seen as a step towards securing the return of two French nationals, Cécile Kohler and Jacques Paris, who have been detained in Iran since May 2022. Esfandiari, who had been living in France since 2018, faces charges of incitement to terrorism, racial hatred, and criminal conspiracy. Her trial is scheduled for January 13th, where she will have the opportunity to defend herself against these allegations. Now we stay in the region. The Druze community in Syria's Idlib province was shaken up after a targeted shooting killed 3 members of their community this week. On Tuesday, gunmen on motorcycles opened fire on a van near the Druze village of Kafr Maris, killing 2 women and a man. The attack follows months of rising sectarian tensions and clashes in other parts of Syria. Local authorities are investigating with increased security measures now in place. The victims' families have expressed fears of further violence and intimidation. The Druze, a minority group in the predominantly Sunni Idlib, have faced increasing threats since the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime, with some community members calling for secession. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Sasha Majda. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Jerusalem. Thank you very much, Sasha, for staying with us. Sasha, what more can you tell us about this Druze community and their situation in Syria?
So the Druze community is a small religious group all around the Middle East, especially in Israel, Lebanon, and Syria. They have very strong connections to the land they live in, and they're very loyal to the countries they also reside in. In Israel especially, the Jews and the Druze, we have a very strong bond, a brotherhood, and the Druze serve in the Israeli army. The Druze are truly active members of society, and we have a very special connection to them. So in Syria, when al-Juliani's regime took power, there started to be massacres to the Druze community there on the southern border near the Golan. The regime started to, in Suwaida, take Druze men. They started to attack the Druze communities. It could have been just some of Giuliani's rebel troops, because at the end, we know Giuliani's past is no secret. He was a convicted terrorist, a wanted terrorist, and members of his army, he unified jihadist elements. So it's no surprise that some of those elements, some of those radical elements from his army started massacring the Druze community in Suwaida. And the world silence actually was pretty surprising, that our national community, because we witnessed a massacre of innocent Druze people in Syria, and there was utter silence. and Israel took action. That's why Israel, a few months ago, started striking targets in Syria and started taking actions to bring aid into the Druze population in Syria and also protect the Druze community. Actually, the security arrangement that Israel is discussing with Syria would potentially have some sort of mechanism to protect the Druze community. The Druze community is a very, very important group for Israel, and we have a deep responsibility to act and protect them. That being said, I think that the treatment of the Druze minority in Syria, but not only the Druze, every minority in Syria is actually going to be a test on the stability of al-Juliani's regime and on whether his true face has changed or he's still the terrorist he used to be. And I hope it's the first one, and I hope that al-Juliani is able to be more of a moderate force, and I hope that he truly abandoned his past, because I think that Syria deserves to grow, Syria deserves to prosper, and they've suffered so much, and I really hope that they have a new future ahead of them.
Yes.
But it all is going to depend on how they're treating their minorities and how the Druze community is being treated, because if you can't treat your minorities well, then that shows everything about your true face and your true ambitions.
Yes, thank you very much, Sasha, for sharing that. I would like to welcome back Ali Muhammad Abushbak to this discussion as well, joining us as Middle East researcher from Cairo. Ali, now looking back at this and building on Sasha's answers, what does the targeting killing reveal about Ahmad al-Shara's situation for minorities and opposition-held areas, and could rising sectarian attacks push Druze community towards Israel or towards calling for autonomy?
First of all, I guess Al-Shara is trying to make a balance in Syria. So that's it. He's trying to impose the control in Syria. And about the Druze minority in Syria, there is also minority Alawi minority that Bashar al-Assad belongs to. That also they are suffering the same fate of the Druze in Syria. So the thing is also the connection between Druze and Israel, it's high connection, because several of Druze service in Israelis armies. So the thing is more difficult for the Syrian and with Israel, as we have seen several times Israel conducted an airstrike against Syrians place and against Syrians administration and army during the tension between Druze and Ahmad al-Shara force. So the thing is, I guess, also according to Syrian news media, that they are trying to create a chaos in Syrian community after the power vacuum when the Bashar al-Assad regime collapsed. So trying to make a chaos in South Syria. So here is the significant point about the huge challenge that Ahmad al-Shara is facing. Also, as I mentioned before, that there is a security talk between Israel and the new regime of Syria. They are going to create an agreement, and they will join the Ibrahim Accord. So the thing is, Ahmad al-Shara now he's in tough test, as we said also before, that Donald Trump, he gave him the chance to prove that he's a moderating person, and he's going to make Syria another Syrian, unlike Bashar al-Assad. And we have seen that first time Israel, Ahmad al-Shara is going to recognize Israel, because Syria is not recognizing Israel since Bashar al-Assad's regime, his father, I guess. I mean, not only the Bashar. So this is a huge challenge facing Ahmad al-Shara, and he's going to prove that he's handling the situation on the ground, and he's believe in peaceful coexistence with Israel in case he's going to recognize Israel. But in my opinion, Benjamin Netanyahu and his government, they are trying to use this card against the area, and we have seen also in Lebanon.
Yes.
Today there is a news talking about there is a warning about the war in Lebanon. It's coming very soon. I guess it's in Israel Hayom. This news has been reported. So I don't believe that Benjamin Netanyahu he care about the Druze minority in Syria as much as he trying to flexing his muscle and his power muscle to just only sell a fake victory for the audience in Israel, as he's trying to do always. He's trying to manipulate the international world and the Israelis community. The
Yes,
situation of those minority, in my opinion, I asked several of Syrian people in Syria, and I asked them how is their situation. They say they have a good position in the community, and they have a good respect. There is no one interfere in their area. But what they have done, they are just only asking for self-determination and separated from the Syrian, and will not happen. That's it. Ahmed al-Sharah is trying to impose the security in the region for the unity of Syria. It's not for fragmented Syria and devastated Syria again, like we have seen it during the 11 years of war between the civilians war in Syria. So here is the significant point, and I guess Ahmed al-Sharah is trying to handle it. He will not let this doors to self-determination and to be another country, like we have seen in Iraq and Kurdistan as well as.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Ali, with that, I would like to thank both our guests, Sasha Majda and Ali Muhammad Abushbak, for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our Gulf today. Now we stay in the region. Lebanon is close to restoring diplomatic ties with Syria. Lebanese Deputy Prime Minister Tariq Mitri has said he described the relationship as built on a clean slate, promising future diplomatic exchanges based on equality and mutual respect. Lebanon has appointed Saad Zakia as ambassador to Damascus, expected to begin in November, while Syria has yet to name a new envoy. Mitri also addressed Syrian refugees and prisoners in Lebanon, calling for repatriation and urgent solutions for detained Syrians, many linked to the former regime. He warned Israel may escalate hostile actions along the southern border amid ongoing military drills and highlighted Lebanon's plan to bring all weapons under state control. And that's a wrap on Gulf Today. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.